Here is the truth most people never hear. You can't manifest what you want. If you are still trying to manifest something, this message is for you, not because you are doing it wrong, but because the very act of trying may be the reason nothing is changing. Most people are told to desire more, to want money, to want freedom, to want a different life. And yet, the more they want, the more distant it feels. The more they visualize, the more frustrated they become. The more they repeat affirmations, the louder the silence gets. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Desire is not a step toward manifestation. Desire is the confirmation that you do not have what you want. This is why the law of attraction keeps people stuck. It trains the mind to chase, to reach, to wait. And waiting is a state. Chasing is a state. Wanting is a state. And every state reproduces itself. Neville Goddard never taught people how to get what they want. He taught something far more radical. He taught that manifestation does not respond to desire. It responds to assumption. The moment you say, "I want," you are declaring absence. You are living as the person who does not have. And the law does not judge that state. It simply reflects it. This is why some people manifest effortlessly. Not because they are lucky, not because they are more spiritual, but because they are not desiring anymore. They are assuming. If this feels confronting, good. Because comfort keeps the old state alive. This video is not here to motivate you. It is not here to teach you a new technique. And it is not here to help you desire better. It is here to show you why desire itself is the trap, and why ignoring the law of attraction may be the most important step you ever take. So before you close this video, pause for a moment. Notice what you are currently trying to manifest, and ask yourself one honest question. Am I living as the one who wants, or as the one who already is? Most people who find Neville Goddard do not arrive by accident. They arrive tired. Tired of trying, tired of hoping, tired of doing everything they were told and seeing nothing change. They have visualized the future. They have repeated affirmations. They have imagined scenes before sleep. They have tried to feel grateful in advance. And for a while it feels promising. There is excitement. There is hope. But slowly something subtle happens. The effort increases. The checking begins. The doubt creeps in. And without realizing it, manifestation becomes work. This is the great confusion. People believe the problem is that they are not doing enough, not visualizing clearly enough, not affirming long enough, not believing strongly enough, so they push harder. But Neville never taught effort. He never taught forcing the mind. He never taught fighting doubt. In fact, he warned against it. Because effort is not neutral. Effort implies resistance, and resistance implies separation. The moment manifestation becomes something you are trying to make happen, you have already stepped out of the state that creates it. This is why so many sincere people fail, not because they lack faith, but because they are unknowingly reinforcing the state of not having. They imagine money while feeling pressure. They affirm abundance while watching the bank account. They visualize love while scanning reality for signs. And every one of those actions carries the same silent message. It is not here yet. The law does not respond to words. It does not respond to repetition. And it does not respond to emotional intensity. It responds to the state you are living in. If you are living in waiting, you manifest more waiting. If you are living in seeking, you manifest more seeking. If you are living in trying, you manifest more effort. And this is the cycle that keeps people stuck for years, even while believing they understand. Neville. Understanding is not the same as occupying a state, and knowing the words does not mean you are living the truth. This is where the real work begins, not by adding more techniques, but by recognizing the subtle state you are returning to every day. At this point, it is important to make a clear distinction, not a semantic one, but a structural one. The law of attraction is built around the idea of getting something. You focus on what you want. You try to attract it into your life. You imagine it coming toward you. There is always a distance implied, a future moment, a gap between you and the thing you desire. Neville Goddard taught something entirely different. Neville was not concerned with getting anything. He was concerned with being someone. This is the core distinction most people miss. The law of attraction asks, how do I bring this into my life? Neville asks, who am I assuming myself to be right now? One approach is about objects and outcomes. The other is about identity and state. This is why desire plays such a different role in Neville's teachings. From the perspective of the law of attraction, desire is encouraged. It is treated as fuel, as motivation, as the starting point. From Neville's perspective, desire is a confession, an unconscious admission that you are not living as the one who already has. When you say "I want," you are not speaking about the future. You are revealing your present state, and the law does not operate in the future. It operates now. Neville explained that imagination is not fantasy. It is not escapism. It is not visualization for comfort. Imagination is reality in its causal form. What you accept as true within yourself is what eventually solidifies as experience. This is why Neville emphasized assumption over attraction. You do not draw things toward you. You move into a state, and the world reorganizes around it. In this framework, desire becomes unnecessary, not because you suppress it, but because it dissolves when assumption takes place. Think about the things in your life you never try to manifest. Your name, your age, the fact that you exist. You do not desire these things, you assume them, and because you assume them, they remain stable. Neville's work was about teaching people to shift the same certainty into other areas of life. Money, relationships, freedom, not by wanting them harder, but by relocating their sense of identity. This is why mixing Neville with the law of attraction creates confusion. One teaches you to chase a result, the other teaches you to occupy a state, and when these two systems are blended, people end up desiring what they are meant to assume. That single misunderstanding is responsible for years of effort, repetition, and frustration. Here is the sentence that changes everything. You cannot manifest what you want. This is not a mindset trick. It's how states reproduce themselves. Not because manifestation does not work, but because wanting places you in the wrong position. This sounds wrong at first, even unfair, but stay with it. Think about something very simple. Right now, you probably have a roof over your head. You do not wake up every morning desiring a roof. You do not visualize it before sleep. You do not affirm, "I will have shelter." Why not? Because you already assume it as a fact. The mind does not chase what it already accepts as normal. It does not desire what it already includes in its identity. Now think about your name. You have never tried to manifest your name. You have never hoped it would arrive one day. You have never worried about losing it. It is not something you want. It is something you are. This is the paradox Neville pointed to. Desire exists only where assumption is absent. The moment you desire money, you are living as the version of yourself who does not have it. The moment you desire love, you are occupying the state of someone without it, and the law responds perfectly to that state. It does not punish you, it does not test you, it simply reflects who you are being. This is why people can visualize abundance for years and remain in the same circumstances. They are not failing to imagine, they are succeeding at maintaining the state of wanting. Wanting feels active, it feels productive, it feels like movement, but it is a subtle form of waiting. And waiting is not neutral. Waiting is an identity. Neville understood this deeply. That is why he never said, "Desire what you want intensely." He said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not tomorrow, not later, now." The shock is not that manifestation requires belief. The shock is that it requires the end of desire, not repression, not denial, but a quiet shift from "I want" to "This is who I am." And until that shift happens, desire will keep reproducing itself as more desire. This is where most people finally begin to see the real issue. Money is not the goal. A relationship is not the goal. Freedom is not the goal. Those are objects, and objects are always secondary. The real goal has always been the state you believe those things will give you. People say they want money, but what they really want is relief. They want ease. They want to stop feeling pressure when they think about life. People say they want a relationship, but what they really want is the feeling of being chosen, of being valued, of not feeling alone in the world. So the object is never the point, the state is. Neville understood this clearly. That is why he never told people to chase circumstances. He told them to change who they were being, because identity always comes before experience. You do not become confident because money arrives. Money arrives because confidence has become natural. You do not feel secure because someone chooses you. Someone chooses you because security is already part of your state. This is difficult to accept at first, Because the mind is trained to think in reverse. It says, when this happens, then I will feel better. When I get that, then I can relax. When life changes, then I can be myself. Neville flipped that completely. He taught that you must be first and allow life to follow. This does not mean pretending. It does not mean lying to yourself. And it does not mean ignoring practical reality. It means noticing the identity you keep returning to. Are you moving through the day as someone who is waiting for permission, or as someone who quietly assumes things work out? Are you reacting to problems as proof of limitation, or as temporary echoes of an old state? These subtle differences matter more than any technique, because the law does not respond to words. It responds to who you are being when no one is watching. This is why two people can use the same method and get completely different results. One is still trying to become. The other already assumes. And assumption is powerful because it is quiet. It does not need to convince. It does not need reassurance. It simply moves as if things are normal. When money is no longer the thing you are chasing and becomes part of who you expect yourself to be, the struggle around it dissolves. Not instantly, but inevitably. This is the shift Neville was pointing to. From object to state. From wanting to being. From effort to identity. And once that shift is made, manifestation stops feeling like a process and starts feeling like a consequence. Quick check. Are you listening as the one who wants or as the one who understands? If you're listening as the one who understands, comment, I am. That's it. At this point, some people start asking a dangerous question. If desire is the problem, then why does visualization sometimes work? That question matters because the answer separates understanding from illusion. Visualization does not fail because it is wrong. It fails because of the state from which it is used. Most people visualize from the same place they desire, from effort, from tension, from hope mixed with fear, and that changes everything. Pay close attention to this. When someone visualizes something they want, they are usually imagining it as not here yet, something that will happen, something that is coming. That may feel positive, but it quietly reinforces the same message. Not now. The subconscious does not respond to images. It responds to identity. You can imagine abundance every night and still wake up as the person who checks reality for proof. You can visualize love and still move through the day expecting disappointment. And expectation always wins. This is why visualization becomes exhausting. You feel like you have to keep doing it, repeating it, fixing it, and the moment you stop, anxiety creeps back in. That's a signal. Because when assumption is real, there is no mental labor. Neville never taught visualization as a daily chore. He taught it as a bridge, a temporary tool to move you from one state into another. Once the state is occupied, the tool is dropped. If visualization requires constant effort, you are still living as the one who does not have. That is not a failure of imagination. That is clarity. The problem is not that you are visualizing wrong. The problem is that you are visualizing instead of shifting identity. Neville was precise about this. He said the feeling is the secret, not emotion, not excitement. Feeling means naturalness. When something feels natural, you stop thinking about it. You stop checking for signs. You stop asking if it worked. That's why visualization works for some people and fails for others. One uses it to become. The other uses it to hope. And hope always keeps things in the future. If this is landing for you, stay with me, because the next part explains what living in the end actually means and why most people misunderstand it completely. Live in the end. This phrase is repeated everywhere, and because it is repeated so often, it is rarely understood. Most people hear live in the end and immediately think of imagining a future result. They picture a scene, they see the money, they see the relationship, they see the success, and then they wait. That is not living in the end. That is visiting the future and returning to the present unchanged. Neville was pointing to something far more subtle. Living in the end does not mean imagining what will happen. It means occupying who you would be if it had already happened. Right now, if you were already the person you want to be, you would not be mentally rehearsing it all day. You would be living from it. There would be a quiet shift in how you think, in how you react, in what feels normal to you. Living in the end is not an action. It is a position. It is the difference between saying, "This will change my life," and quietly moving, as if your life already has momentum. When Neville spoke about the end, he was not referring to an outcome. He was referring to a state of consciousness, a state where effort drops away, a state where seeking ends, a state where you stop negotiating with reality. This is why living in the end feels uncomfortable at first, because the mind asks, if I stop wanting, what keeps things moving? The answer is identity. When identity shifts, behavior shifts automatically. You stop chasing, you stop forcing, you stop checking. Not because you are disciplined, but because the old urgency no longer fits. If you still feel pressure to maintain the state, you are not living in the end, you are visiting it. Living in the end feels surprisingly ordinary, almost boring. There is no emotional high, no constant excitement, just a sense of inner finality. Neville described this as naturalness, the feeling that something is settled, and when something is settled internally, life does not rush to prove it. It unfolds at its own pace. This is where many people panic, because without effort they feel like they are doing nothing. But nothing is exactly what allows the new state to stabilize. Living in the end is not pretending. It is not denying facts. It is choosing which reality you grant authority to. And once that authority shifts, the outer world follows, not instantly, but inevitably. This is where Neville's teaching becomes mature, quiet, and often misunderstood. Neville called it the Sabbath. Not a religious day, not a ritual, a psychological state. The Sabbath is what happens after the assumption is made. It is the moment the inner work ends. Most people never reach this state. Not because it is difficult, but because it feels too simple to trust. The Sabbath is rest, not physical rest, mental rest. It is the point where desire dissolves on its own. Not because you forced it away, not because you disciplined your thoughts, but because there is nothing left to want. If you still feel the need to check reality, you are not in the Sabbath. Checking is effort. Checking is doubt disguised as responsibility. People say, I'm just being practical. But what they are really doing is looking for reassurance. The Sabbath does not look for reassurance. When you are truly in the Sabbath, you stop monitoring the world for signs. You stop asking, is it working? Did I do it right? Why hasn't it shown up yet? Those questions disappear naturally, because questioning belongs to the old state. Neville described the Sabbath as a feeling of finality, a quiet certainty. Not excitement, not anticipation, just knowing. This is where many people panic, because without effort they feel exposed. They think, if I stop visualizing, if I stop affirming, if I stop checking, won't everything fall apart? This fear reveals something important. It reveals how much identity was tied to doing. The Sabbath asks you to let go of control without losing awareness. It is not passivity, it is confidence without noise. The Sabbath is not something you enter once, it is something you return to. At first you may slip out of it. Old habits return, old thoughts resurface. That does not mean you failed, it means the new state is stabilizing. Neville never taught constant vigilance, he taught return. Each time you notice yourself striving again, you gently return to rest. No correction, no judgment, just rest. This is why desire dissolves naturally in the Sabbath. When the mind is no longer working toward something, it stops generating lack. Lack requires motion. It requires comparison. It requires time. The Sabbath removes all three. And when the inner world becomes still, the outer world begins to move. Not urgently, not dramatically, but precisely. Neville said the Sabbath is the sign that the assumption has been accepted, not intellectually, but emotionally. When you reach this state, manifestation stops being a goal. It becomes background, life continues, you live your days, you respond to what is in front of you, but there is no tension underneath it. No silent argument with reality, just a quiet alignment. And from that alignment, things unfold in ways effort never could. This is where Neville's teaching becomes uncomfortable for many people, not because it is complex, but because it removes the last place to hide. Neville called it e-wipo. Everyone is you pushed out. This does not mean other people are not real. It does not mean you control others like puppets. And it does not mean you should blame yourself for everything. It means something simpler and much more powerful. The world you experience is a mirror of the state you are living in. Not your words, not your intentions, your state. If the same patterns keep repeating, there is a state repeating underneath them. Think about money. Some people constantly meet opportunities. Others constantly meet obstacles. Some always feel supported. Others always feel blocked. This is not luck, and it is not punishment. It is reflection. The world does not decide how to treat you. It responds to how you are being. If you live as someone who expects resistance, you will meet it everywhere. If you live as someone who quietly assumes things work out, life begins to cooperate in subtle ways. This applies to people as well. If you assume others are unreliable, they will confirm it. If you assume you must fight for respect, you will find reasons to fight. If you assume you are overlooked, the world will keep overlooking you. EIYPO does not mean guilt. It means responsibility without shame. You did not consciously choose many of these states. They were learned, absorbed, normalized. Neville never taught people to judge themselves for this. He taught them to change the state. You do not fix the reflection by arguing with the mirror. You change what is being reflected. This is why forcing circumstances never works long-term. You may fix one situation, but the pattern returns, because the state was never addressed. When the state shifts, the same world responds differently. The same people behave differently. The same opportunities appear with less resistance. Not because the world changed, but because you did. This is power without guilt. You are not responsible for the past, but you are responsible for what you continue to occupy. EIYPO does not ask you to control others. It asks you to become aware of yourself, to notice the quiet assumptions you carry about money, about relationships, about life itself, and when those assumptions change, the mirror has no choice but to follow. This is not magic, it is consistency. The inner world sets the tone, the outer world keeps the beat. This is the point where Neville's teaching stops being exciting and starts being honest, because the law can be misused, not because it is dangerous, but because power without awareness always is. Many people discover these teachings and immediately turn them into a tool for the ego. They want money to feel superior. They want control to feel safe. They want admiration to feel whole. And sometimes it works. They manifest success. They manifest recognition. They manifest influence, and yet something strange happens. They still feel empty, not temporarily, persistently. Neville noticed this in his later years. He saw students who had learned how to change circumstances, but had not changed themselves. They could shape events, but they were still trapped in the same inner hunger. This is why Neville slowly shifted his focus. He began speaking less about getting things and more about what he called the promise. The promise was not about manifestation. It was about awakening. It was the realization that the true self is not the one chasing experiences, but the awareness behind them. You can manifest everything you think you want and still feel incomplete, because objects cannot resolve identity. Money cannot fix self-rejection. Relationships cannot heal abandonment. Power cannot replace wholeness. Using the law from ego does not fail. It succeeds in the wrong direction, and success in the wrong direction feels like progress until it doesn't. Neville never warned people with fear. He warned them with clarity. He did not say, "Don't use the law." He said, "Know who is using it." When manifestation is driven by lack, it strengthens lack. When it is driven by comparison, it strengthens separation. When it is driven by fear, it builds fragile results. This is why some people manifest and then immediately lose what they gained. Not because the law stopped working, but because the state behind it was unstable. The mature use of the law is different. It does not ask, "What can I get?" It asks, "Who am I becoming?" Neville's later work emphasized this shift. Manifestation was no longer the destination. It was a side effect, a natural consequence of alignment, not the measure of worth. This teaching does not take power away from you. It gives it context. It reminds you that the goal was never to dominate reality, but to understand yourself within it. And when that understanding deepens, manifestation becomes lighter, less urgent, less obsessive. You still create, you still experience, but you are no longer using the law to fill a hole. You are using it from completeness, and that difference changes everything. One of Neville's most misunderstood teachings is also one of his most powerful. He called it revision. At first glance, revision sounds strange, almost unrealistic. How could the past be changed? Neville was very clear about this. You do not change events. You change meaning, and meaning is what shapes the future. Memory is not a static record. It is a living state. Every time you remember something, you are not accessing the past. You are reactivating a feeling in the present. And that feeling quietly influences how you see yourself, how you expect life to respond, and what you allow yourself to receive. This is why unresolved memories keep repeating themselves as patterns. A memory of rejection becomes sensitivity. Sensitivity becomes guarded behavior. Guarded behavior creates more rejection. The event is over. The state is not. Revision is Neville's way of ending that loop. It is not denial. It is not pretending something never happened. It is choosing not to carry the emotional charge forward. Here is how Neville described it. You take an event from the past that still feels heavy, something that still defines you in some way, and you revise it internally. You imagine it not as it happened, but as it should have happened. You hear different words. You feel a different response. You leave the scene with dignity, peace, or relief. This is not about fantasy. It is about identity correction. Because the subconscious does not store facts. It stores impressions. When the impression changes, the state changes. And when the state changes, the future reorganizes itself. Here's a simple example. Imagine someone who was humiliated early in life. They carry that memory quietly. It shapes how they speak, how they show up, how much they expect from others. Through revision, they revisit that moment internally and experience it differently, not to escape reality but to remove its authority. The memory loses its grip, and something subtle happens. Their reactions soften, their confidence stabilizes. Opportunities that once felt inaccessible begin to appear naturally, not because the past was erased, but because it stopped dictating the present. This is emotional liberation. Revision does not fix the world. It frees the self. And a freed self moves differently. Neville taught that revision should be done gently, without force, without intensity, ideally before sleep. When the mind is relaxed, when imagination feels natural, you do not repeat it endlessly, you do not analyze it. You simply accept the revised version as the only one that matters. Then you let it go. This is where many people struggle. They want to feel something dramatic. But revision works quietly. Its effect is noticed later, in how life responds without effort. People treat you differently. Situations resolve more easily. Old limitations lose relevance. The future changes because the past stopped pulling on it. Revision is not about control. It is about release. It is Neville's way of showing that you are not bound by what happened. You are bound only by what you continue to assume about it. And when that assumption changes, time itself loosens its grip. At this point, the pattern should be clear. Desire and assumption cannot exist at the same time. One looks forward, the other stands now. Desire says, I will be whole when this arrives. Assumption says, I am whole, and life responds to that. This is not philosophy, it is practical. Every technique you've heard about was only ever meant to help you cross one bridge, from wanting to being. The moment identity shifts, technique becomes unnecessary. That is why forcing never works for long. Forcing belongs to the old state. Chasing belongs to the old identity. Neville's teaching was simple at its core. You do not manifest what you want. You manifest who you are. When money stops being something you pursue and becomes something you quietly expect, pressure dissolves. When love stops being something you seek and becomes something you assume about yourself, relationships change. Not because you tried harder, but because you stopped arguing with reality. Natural manifestation is not dramatic. It is subtle. It feels almost ordinary. There is no rush, no tension, no constant checking, just alignment. From that alignment, life moves, and it moves without resistance. Before you move on, pause for a moment. Ask yourself quietly, what state am I living from right now? Not what I want, not what I hope for, but who I am being. If this landed for you, leave a comment with just one word. Settled. No explanation, no story. If you know why that word fits, you're already listening correctly. This channel is for seekers like you. Subscribe and stay with the work that happens inside. There is nothing to chase, nothing to force, just a state to return to, and let life follow.